Hey guys, back at the playground again, huh?
Yep. You know what this playground could use? A wine country.
Heck yeah, and some waves, so we could go surfing. Oh,
Ah, love that!
A redwood forest would be cool.
I'm in.
Ah, ski slopes.
let's do it.
Can a girl go shopping?
Yeah, baby!
Wait! Did we just invent California?
Discover why California is the ultimate playground at visitcalifornia.com.
Every now and then, you might be watching a TV show or movie, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, yeah, I know that spot. Portland and just Oregon in general are surprisingly very popular locations to film in. There's been something like over 500 films and TV shows shot in our region. So what's so cool about our area that's attracting Hollywood's attention? Today on CityCast Portland, we're talking with Katie Rasmussen, a location manager who's worked with big budget films and TV shows like Grimm and the upcoming Amazon Prime series Criminal. She's walking us through how the places we all know and love get translated onto the big screen, and also why we're often the favored locations for some darker themed films and TV shows. It's Monday, March 17th. I'm Claudia Meza, and this is what Portland's talking about. Okay, just straight off, like, what are your top 3 films set in our area?
Okay, so I gave this some thought, but my answer, the first 2, I'm going to have to say, were the movies that came out when I was a kid that were shot in Portland. The first one, of course, Free Willy.
I always forget Free Willy was shot here. That's so funny.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that one's crazy because it features Astoria so prominently.
Mm-hmm.
I remember watching the movie and being like, oh my God, it's the Burnside Skate Park. And just thinking that was so cool. And like, I mean, they're hauling around this giant whale and it goes to like, one of the locations still exists. It's they take Free Willy or they take Willy or whatever. The whale.
They take Free P. Willy.
Yeah.
Go on.
Whatever his name is. I don't know
Yeah.
if it's Free and Willy. But they take him to the car wash on MLK and they hose him down to keep him nice and wet. And it's still there. It's so cool.
The Washman on Burnside?
Not the Washman. It's further up MLK. I forget the name. It's really worse for wear. It's not in good shape these days. It's like red. That's all I remember. It's like kind of like a burnt red.
There's no plaque or anything. Okay.
Oh, there might be. Actually, I should talk to the film office. They should have a plaque there.
There should be a plaque. Yeah.
That's so funny.
Okay, so you have Free Willy. What's your other 2?
So Free Willy, Mr. Holland's Opus.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Where was that shot?
Grant High School was a big
okay.
prominent location. It was about the high school teacher who was the music teacher with the son that was deaf. And I recently watched a portion of it, and they actually go to St. John's. There's a whole scene at the end in St. John's. But I think they did some funny camera reverse thing. Because I was looking at it. I was like, that's not the side of the street. He's crossing the street, but he's crossing the street to the same side of the street. So I think they did like a little movie magic thing over there. Which is, those kind of things are fun to pick out, of course.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And what's your last one?
You know, the last one I'm really going to throw a weird one maybe folks haven't heard of, which is Lean on Pete.
Oh, I've heard of Lean on Pete.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was shot here in 2017. I was invited to work on it. I was working on something else, so I couldn't do it. But it's more of like an independent film about a kid who's kind of down on his luck who ends up,
Horses?
trying to get into the horse industry. Yeah,
Okay.
working with horses.
That's all I remember. I've never seen the movie, but I've had friends who worked on it and they
Oh, cool.
kind of explained it. And in my head, whenever I think of Lean on Pete, I think of someone leaning on a horse. I know that's not the plot of the movie, but in my head, that's what happens.
Yeah, I guess he emotionally leads on the horse, so there's that. But yeah, I thought it turned out beautifully. It was really sensitive. But I like those kinds of movies that come out of Oregon that are kind of like, not the big splashy ones, but the more like under the radar, more subtle ones that are just beautiful storytelling that also, use our landscape really well.
That's cool. You mentioned Astoria, and I just have to say that I really want Astoria to be back to its late 80s, early 90s powerhouse as a location, because Astoria is so beautiful and sweet and wonderful, and I just really want them to get all that work, Katie. So if you could just direct everyone back to Astoria. Just remember when Astoria was just like the center of children adventure films, or just like, Kindergarten Cop and like Short Circuit and like all these like really cool films. I want there to be an Astoria renaissance.
There might be. I mean, who knows? Who knows what's around the corner? I mean, I know they're This is like whatever, but I know they're working on Goonies too and writing a script for it. I saw that in the trades.
Oh, I hope they go back to the house.
Yeah, who knows? But you got my heart there. Historia is insanely beautiful. I was just there for the Fisher Poets reading a couple weeks ago.
Oh my God, I love the Fisher Poets reading.
Yeah.
All right. Well, could you explain what a location manager does exactly for someone who might not really understand?
Sure. Yeah. So a location manager is one of the first people hired on a production. Their primary task is to work with the director and the production designer to find the physical locations that appear in the TV show or movie. And then once the locations are chosen by the director, it's my job and my department's job to work with the city or county or state to do all the permits, to do everything that happens on location behind the camera. So the movie trucks, the parking, the catering, if it's a street, but in our story, it's 1972, then we have to work with all the homeowners on the street, have them move their cars out of their driveways and put period specific cars in the driveway. So we handle everything that happens on location as well.
Can you drop some stuff that you've worked on that people might have seen?
Sure. So I've been a location manager, so department head for 12 years here in Portland. NBC's Grimm was the big one that I worked on because that lasted 6 years of my career. So that would be a big one. I worked on Timmy Failure, which was a Disney movie that filmed here in Portland in 2018. I did Significant Other. I did The Waterman, another movie called All Together Now. But last year I spent basically 11 months working on a TV series called Criminal that's based on a comic book series that was written in 2007 by Ed Brubaker. He's a really highly renowned comic book writer, artist, has a huge following. They selected Portland out of 4 cities that they scouted across the United States, Boston, Chicago, and Los Angeles. And they chose Portland for that show. And lo and behold, it brought a huge production, the biggest thing Portland's seen in a long time. I would say it's about 3 times as big as Grimm, scale-wise.
Wow, that's huge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What do you think attracts movie and TV directors to our area? Because beating out Chicago and Boston, that's pretty big.
Yeah. Portland and Oregon, it's got this great combination of a reasonable sized city. It's not sprawling big, but it's big enough. It's got these architectural elements that are really intriguing, which is, of course, our 12 bridges across the Willamette River, which architecturally look fantastic on camera. It's got lots of different pockets of personality. You can bring lots of different stories here. It also has this great backdrop of the Pacific Northwest forest with all of its crazy moss. We had a really prominent TV series that was looking at coming to Oregon to bring a pretty cool TV series. And the executive producer of that was like, I want to see the biggest trees. I want to see the moss. I want to see this. And he was blown away because I was like, okay. I, took what he did. I soaked it in. And then I was like, okay, I will take care of you. And so, for that particular production, I took him to Vernonia because they were looking for a small logging town. That was a big part of the story. There was a national parks element to it. We went to Silver Falls State Park. He was, of course, blown away by the size of the trees. I was like, you want really big trees? I'll take you. Here we go. And it's still, I've been living here my entire life for the most part. And it still captures my imagination. It never stopped. I never got bored of it. So folks from LA, folks from, across the country are just like, really quite captivated.
It's our trees is what I'm hearing. People come for our trees.
Yeah. Well, of course they do. Of course they do.
All right, well, let's take a quick break here. And when we come back, why Portland is becoming the go-to moody location. On March 28th, the Portland State University Center for Entrepreneurship is hosting their annual Clean Tech Challenge Finals. Now, that's PSU's premier invention competition, which gives student teams $1,000 in grant funding and then 10 weeks to develop innovative prototypes. And this year, they're also adding a brand new companion competition, the Everyday Entrepreneur, which opens up the opportunity to develop and pitch all other business ideas, no prototypes required. You can watch this all play out like our own local Shark Tank, where all 12 teams showcase their hard work and compete live for $3,000 in prizes. The winner of the Clean Tech Challenge is then invited to represent PSU at Oregon's only statewide collegiate invention competition, Invent Oregon, this June. The event is absolutely free, and cosplaying as your favorite invention of the last century is highly encouraged, no matter how many weird looks you're getting. To register, head to the link in our show notes.
This episode is sponsored by Babbel. Are you holding back on foreign travel plans this year because you're afraid of the language gap? I'm not, because I have Babbel. I'm David Plotz, the CEO of CityCast, and I'm learning Spanish on Babbel, getting ready for a trip to Mexico City. Babbel is the language learning app that gets you talking. Babbel's quick 10-minute lessons, handcrafted by over 200 language experts, get you to begin speaking your new language in 3 weeks or at whatever pace you choose. Babbel's tips and tools are inspired by the real-life stuff you actually need when communicating. With a focus on conversation, you'll be ready to talk wherever you go. Babbel has given me great lessons on getting directions, ordering in a restaurant, and making plans. And of all the things I'm doing in Mexico City, I'm probably most excited about the soccer game we're going to. So I was excited to learn how to cheer from Babbel. That'll be me you'll hear yelling, "Fuerza Tigres! Fuerza Tigres!" With over 16 million subscriptions sold, Babbel's 14 award-winning language courses are backed by a 20-day money-back guarantee. Let's get more of you talking in a new language. Babbel is gifting our listeners 60% off subscriptions at babbel.com/citycast. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/citycast. Spelled BABBEL.com/citycast. Babbel.com/citycast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Do you ever come up against filmmakers having a set idea about what Portland should look like? I know that's usually not how it works because you tell them. The way it works is that you're like, this is what you want, here it is. But just some cliches that you've come across the most of people talking about, oh, Portland, blah-de-blue-de-blah,
Oh, man, that's a good question. I think it's more about the surprise of the diversity of what we have to offer more than it is what we don't have.
An expectation?
Yeah, I would say it's more about we are able to give them more and we're able to mirror. Because what happens often with my particular job is I am given pictures of something they saw in New Mexico. They're like, oh, this house is really cool. And I'm like, it's in New Mexico. It looks like New Mexico. It's an adobe house, So we'll be given these weird challenges, stuff like that to find.
While they're shooting in Portland. And you're like, yeah, so you wanted big trees. not a cactus. They're just like, now, can you get us a cactus?
Yeah. Oh, all the time. Yep, that's exact. So I would say it's more like the opposite. They'll give me something from somewhere else in the country. And because they've already chosen Portland and Portland works for 85% of the locations, there's 1 or 2 that we literally do not have. And so it's about trying to, creatively problem solve how to make that possible.
Yeah, well, the reason I ask about cliches is because I've noticed that Portland, just our area in general, has become the go-to location for darker films. We're just vampires, Portland. Oh, just weird animals that turn into people, back to animals, Portland. Or just serial killer? He probably lives in Portland. Because the weird part is that the larger America sometimes thinks of Portland and think of Portlandia, and they're just super goofy liberals. And I'm surprised that reflection didn't stick. And instead, when I look at films, I'm just of course it's filmed in Portland. It's about a Satanist cult. Why wouldn't it be filmed here?
Yeah. No, thanks for highlighting that. I think that's what makes Portland so interesting over the years. We can give, directors and producers the more optimistic, aspirational look. We can give them that. But I think what's so attractive about Portland is that seedy underbelly. Because, I've been here my entire life and it has always been there. And I've always been is that going to go away? Kind of everything's cool, but what's going on underneath that bridge over there? What is it? It's kind of dark over there. And the connection to the water and the river and the Willamette. And those are the projects I'm really attracted to, is that kind of the ones that can capture both. And I think actually NBC's Grimm did a pretty good job at that. It was at once, a police detective show, and it was also a monster show with people finding dead bodies that had been kind of brutally people murdered under a bridge or whatever.
Yeah, by monsters.
By monsters. Our favorite kind of murderers.
Does Nicolas Cage have like some sort of deal with Portland where he can only shoot here?
I sure hope so.
I feel like every Nicolas Cage film, they're like, oh, it's shot in Portland. Cool.
Yeah, so Pig was pretty cool. I didn't work on Pig, but yeah, that was a fantastic film.
If you're a Portlander, you have to watch it because the lore of how they like married our food chef culture and the Shanghai tunnels is amazing. It's so fun.
Yeah.
When I saw that scene, I was like, oh, hilarious. I love this. So how do you find places to shoot? Like, do you just drive around and think, oh, that looks cool? Or like if you're something that's new and you're like, oh, I've not taken a picture or thought about this kind of situation. Like, how do you and your team come up with that?
That's a great question. I mean, that's where the creativity kind of comes in. We ran into a pretty big challenge on, that show I worked on last year, Criminal. We had a scene that was taking place in a tunnel, and it was a pretty exciting scene. It was more or less like some gunfire and some criminal activity. That's what I'll say. It was a tunnel where vehicles would be traveling through the tunnel. But you worked with the first assistant director. So a lot of my job is, well, how do we practically solve the problems that are on the page? And the first assistant director who schedules the movie or TV show was like, we need 4 days to film this scene. So what tunnels in Portland, Oregon, and we don't have that many tunnels to begin with, can you close?
Yeah, that you could shut down for 4 days.
But we actually need it for more than 4 days because we have to go through there and do rigging, pre-lighting, set dressing, whatever. Probably looking at like a week. So these are like, you've got what's written on the page, and then you've got the feasibility of doing that within the actual environment of a living, breathing, working city. These are the challenges.
What tunnel did you end up shutting down?
Isn't that fun? Isn't that a fun question? So I'll tell you what. So we scouted, so the two that I was able to like show as like options was the tunnel at Rocky Butte. There's a tunnel there. It's like more like a do-do-do-do-do, like not very interesting. It's like Scooby-Doo gang. And then the Cornell Tunnel, which was a lot more like, that would have been harder to do because it is a pretty big like thoroughfare to get to like the West Hills and whatnot. So long story short, because of what the director wanted was so specific, they basically wanted the Vista Tunnel, the Highway 26 tunnel. I kid you not.
They can't have that tunnel.
Oh, I know. I had to ask ODOT. I had to ask the dumb question, which is my job.
I love it. And ODOT was like, give us a week. Say,
yeah, I
know.
know. Yeah, well, basically, yeah. I mean, I had to ask all the questions, but they ended up building the inside of this tunnel in a warehouse, which was pretty cool. It looked fabulous. But then we had the opposite problem where we had to find the connective tissue entrance.
The exteriors?
Yes, we had to find the exterior. So then that became like the elephant in the room. And they actually built a truss, what looks like a rock and roll truss, if you will, across the city road. And then they put green screen over it. So when you watch it on TV, it'll look like some tunnel. You're like, that doesn't exist. If anybody in Portland's gonna be like, that doesn't exist here, and they're exactly right.
You're like, yeah, it doesn't.
Yeah, exactly. No, it doesn't. But we still had to find the reverse engineering of like the right street. So there you go.
Have you ever found a location that was so cool, but like you just didn't work for the movie for some reason? And like you're just, like there's that joke in TV writing rooms where someone just has a dumb joke that they want to put in every scene. They're just like, no. And they just keep bringing it back. And they're just like, dude, we're not doing that joke. And I'm just wondering, Katie, if you have that location. And they're just like, no.
Oh my gosh.
Where you're just like, but it's so cool.
Well, I will tell you what. I worked on this crazy production. I forget everything I did. Season 2 of American Vandal for Netflix. But in that show, the kids in I think it's a prep high school, drink the lemonade at the cafeteria and they all get like really bad diarrhea. I'm just going to tell you what's up. That's literally the storyline. That's the whole thing is the storyline. But they wanted an elite like college, right? They wanted like prep college, like the nicest thing ever. So I literally had to go out and start location scouting for college prep, like the nicest schools, Lewis and Clark College, Marylhurst University, like all these beautiful schools, get in there, start scouting it and be like, okay, so the scene is about some kids dropping trow and having the number 2 right here in the middle of the hallway, but it's actually 50 kids doing it at once. So it was just like, I was like, how do I have these conversations with these like elite colleges And it was a fictional college in our story, or high school. I forget which it was, but
nobody wants to be the poop school. Yeah.
that's exactly right. I was like, oh my gosh. So I have to like literally go have this conversation. I mean, it was like, I've done a lot of hard things, but that was one of the hardest things I've done because I was like, am I seriously doing this right now?
Yeah.
So,
What school did you end up landing on?
You know, we actually ended up with Marylhurst. This was back when they were still open.
Oh, is that why they closed? Was the scene?
That's the running joke.
Katie, did you close them down? Wow.
I know. Oh my gosh. I hope this doesn't make the cut.
So you're just saying like that was just difficult, but there's never been a location that you tried to sell that the director or the production team was just like, no, we're not going to do it there.
All the time. I mean, there's like, when I read a script, there's stuff that comes to mind that I'm like, oh yeah. And honestly, I'm always looking for like the biggest, most awesome thing for whatever I work on. So, you know, I'm usually in somewhat alignment with what the director wants. Thank God, or at least in the ballpark.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I would say it's not uncommon for me to, you know, show something that I feel very attached to, but they're just like, no, this isn't it. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh.
And you're just like, you said Gorgeous Bridge. We're at St. John's.
Yeah. And I will say the most frustrating reason for me, I mean, I'm not the director of photography, but there's tons of cooks in the kitchen. I'll say that when they're choosing locations. So you've got the director, production designer, but then you get the director of photography involved because they're the cinematographer. We'll get into a location and it'll be beautiful, perfect, whatever. And they'd be like, the sun's not right. And I'm like, the sun's not right.
I can't do anything there, buddy.
I know. And I'm like, but everything else about it's like absolutely perfect. Like, that's the one that kills me.
The sun's not, the celestial reasons of hating a place, is that?
Yeah. Well, you know, it's backlit or front lit or whatever.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
if it's like a big exterior, they can't control it as well as they can if it's a small, intimate scene. So it's just like, man, when I hear that, I'm like, no. I'm like, but it's perfect. I love it.
Oh, man.
So, yeah.
Well, Katie, thank you so much for hanging out with us and just going through some stuff. I feel like I probably have like a million more questions to ask you, but we have a short format. So unfortunately, maybe we'll do a part 2 sometime. But I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Sure. No, thanks. This was really fun.
Well, that's all for today here on CityCast Portland. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more from around the city. Until then, see you at Slim's.